I'm a journalist, and I'm also the founder of ESPR, a public relations company based in London. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by two members of the Impact X team. Firstly, Ezechi Britton, who is the CTO in Principal and Chief Technology Officer in Principal, and Yvonne Bajela, who's also a Principal. So good morning to you both.
Morning.
Morning. Hi.
Morning, guys. Morning. So before we get going, we're going to start in about a minute or so. So now's an opportunity for you to really get comfortable, to grab a coffee. It's still quite early today. Grab a notepad and pen so you can take down some of the key talking points for today's session. Just a few bits of housekeeping so we can really get the most out of today's session. Firstly, we will be recording and we will be sharing the webinar on our website on impactx.com. The other thing we want you to do is to really be involved. We put these sessions on for you so that you can really get some face time, really pick the brains of the Impact X team. So please do get involved by sending through your questions. Now to do that, if you look at the bottom of the screen, you will see a series of buttons and there's a Q&A function. So throughout the conversation, please do get involved, be engaged, send those burning questions, and we'll try to get through as many of them as we possibly can. We really want to hear from you, especially with the way things are going on at the moment. We really want to be helpful and useful to all of you. If you want to, please put your name before the questions, but equally if you want to remain anonymous and you don't want us to say your name, you just put anon at the start and that's absolutely fine as well. And those are the main things. I want to also let you know that we're across social media on LinkedIn, on Twitter and on Instagram. So please, you can connect with us there as well. Brilliant, okay. So with the housekeeping out of the way, we're ready to begin today. So first, again, I want to say thank you so much for joining us for today's session. The topic will be how to pivot your technology strategy in a crisis. As we're all fully aware, we're going through such a tumultuous time in 2020. It's something that none of us have ever been through, and so many of your businesses are being impacted. And so we thought one of the most useful things we could do was talk to you about technology, which is so crucial to all our businesses, and how you can pivot your strategy to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. Once again, I'm joined by Ezechi Britton, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Impact X, and also Principal Yvonne Bajela. So again, good morning to you both. So before we get into the questions, Ezechi will be leading on the questions today. But before we do get into the questions, I'd like to speak to Yvonne about what Impact X has seen over the last 12 months and what they're seeing in the market now. So Yvonne, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Thank you, Eva. So there's been a lot of media coverage on the Black community in the last few weeks in the UK and in the US, from the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 to the recent Black Lives Matter campaign in light of the unjust death of George Floyd. Over the weekend, Anthony Joshua highlighted that, the importance of investing in Black businesses. We at Impact X were established to do exactly that, invest in Black and female founded companies. Over the next few weeks and months, we'll be sharing more about the work that we have been doing at Impact X, and also the research we are working on with Extend Ventures to highlight the level of funding in Black founders. At Impact X, we invest in digital technology, health education and lifestyle, and media and entertainment. Last year, we had well over 500 inbound requests for funding. Of those, approximately 63% were from the digital and technology category. And we've come across some incredible technical founders during that time. On today's webinar, we really want to highlight the importance of technical founders within technology companies, and we'll also highlight where CTOs should really be focusing their time. I'll now hand over to Eva, who will begin the panel discussion.
Thanks, Yvonne, and thanks for bringing us up to speed with what Impact X has been seeing over the past 12 months. So for those of you, again, who have just joined, this is the second in our Founders webinar series. And I'm going to be talking today with Ezechi Britton, who's the Chief Technology Officer, primarily about how to pivot your digital and technical strategy. But first of all, Ezechi, the word technology is used in so many different contexts and it means different things to different people. So for the purposes of this, what would you say, what is technology?
Hi, Eva, and hi to everyone in the audience as well for joining us. It's a pleasure to speak to you today. Firstly, before I start, I do just want to apologize. There are some technical issues happening around us. So there are some building works taking place in the building. So if you can't hear me, please let me know. Just flag it at me and I'll try and speak a little bit louder. So what is technology? This is a really important question because I find in most organizations there's quite a misunderstanding of what tech is and what the role of technology is in a company. So tech to me comes down to a few key things. One are the people. So you have those people who are involved in technology, who are coming up with innovative solutions, who are finding new ways to improve your business. And another is the actual technical side itself. So the services, the services that you use, and those can be external services. They can be things like G Suite, for example, Gmail, Google Docs, Microsoft 365. But they can also be the apps that your company builds itself. So that can be the web apps that you build, the mobile apps that you build, or internal testing tools that you develop for your company. So there's multiple aspects to what technology is. And I think it's important to recognize some technologies are enabling and some are driving, right? And some are your product. And only once you really understand what aspect of technology it is that you're dealing with can you really understand that question.
Okay, and in your opinion, what should CTOs be focusing their efforts on right now?
So in a time like this, it can be often quite difficult for a CTO to think about where should I be spending my time, right? Firstly, I feel the role of a CTO is to ensure that the company has the right technical strategy to enable the business to operate in the way it needs to, whether it's to support the business's sales strategy, the business's marketing strategy. That is the role of the CTO.
Sometimes, but in terms of the current the situation we're in now, what should they be? Because you're right, there's so many things that role calls for, but specifically as we are now in the middle of this global pandemic, what should they be focused on?
So on that, what CTOs really need to be thinking about is, given the resources that we have, given the teams that we have, given the products that we have, where can our time and efforts be best spent on either helping to drive the business forward, keep the business alive, make the business more efficient, or find whole new revenue streams for the business? Because technology is uniquely positioned to solve some of those problems. For example, is there a way to take advantage of the systems that we use today in order to reduce costs in the business so that we can extend the runway of the company? This is a really critical aspect, and it's usually the place where I'd start if I'm a CTO. My first thing is, in an environment like this, what can we do to help the business save money, right?
Yeah.
Because by extending your runway, you give yourself more time. And that can fundamentally come down to which services are we using that we can cancel? Which services are we using that we can consolidate? Have I got staff in my team who could be doing other things for other groups that will allow us to save money elsewhere by automating certain processes that we've traditionally thrown people at, for example? That's a classic example of where technology teams can help to solve those kind of below the line problems and extend runway. So that's the first place I would be focusing on as a CTO. The next is then, well, with our existing products, what can we do to potentially increase profitability? What can we do to improve sales? Can we rapidly increase onboarding, for example, to get our customers through the door faster? And I've got a great anecdote around that, which I can touch on later if you like, about a company that looked at this exact problem. Then the final step is, well, actually, we've extended our runway as far as we can. by either reducing services, bringing on more services, automating internal pipeline processes, et cetera. We've driven our current product as far as we can, either through improving our onboarding, improving key product offerings, getting access to more information around our clients. The final one is, well, actually, do we need to find an entirely different revenue stream, right?
And at what point do you make that call? Because if you've set your business up and it's running along smoothly and then this happens, at what point do you make that decision to completely pivot?
That is a really difficult question to answer, because there is no rocket science to it. There is no mathematical equation that says this is the time when you must pivot. I think there are times when you clearly have to. For example, in my own organization, Code Untapped, we were very much what we call an innovation labs business, whereby we connect underrepresented technologists with companies that are searching for innovative problems, and we do it through in-person labs days. Anything to do with in-person events-based businesses is dead for the next 12 months. Yeah. So that is a company that we've spent the last year developing, and actually no longer
you realized pretty quickly that that was a problem. And so is that when do you try and see if you can make it work, or do you just is it really important to be quite decisive in these situations, make a decision to pivot and then try something else, or do you try and see what you can salvage, hoping that it might get better?
So I think in that example, there's quite a nuclear option, right? Which is very clear. There's been an absolute disaster that's taken place. Your industry no longer exists. You either fold your company or you find an alternative. For us, the alternative, right, we need to make it, as to your words, a decisive decision to move into virtual. That's quite a straightforward conversation for us. For other businesses, it can be tougher. Yeah. Sometimes it can look like, you know what, maybe the business isn't fully dead. Maybe there's something we can do here. Actually, I believe we can probably do something X, Y, Z. That's the danger, right? Because actually it can be easy to feel the best thing for us is just to keep doing what we were doing. This business will come back. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Or there are ways that we can find a little bit more cash out of this business. And actually, I don't want to spend any time trying to pivot my company away. That is a difficult call to make. And I personally believe the best thing to do is to start running experiments, very quick experiments, fast iterations, learn fast, fail fast. That's really important in these kind of situations.
Okay, so you said learn fast and fail fast?
Well, fail fast, learn faster, right? Is the way I like to look at it.
Let's get that right.
Yeah. But yeah, ultimately what I believe it comes down to, and I'm very much a proponent of the agile methodologies, lean methodologies. It comes down to coming up with small bets, taking concerted, decisive action, trying things out and getting very quick feedback. Okay,
so this is about so you're talking about structural changes here, and actually I was going to ask you, that leads nicely onto the next point, is how do you structure your organization and then you make better use of technology in these situations?
Yeah, so absolutely. When we talk about structure in technology teams, as most of you are probably aware, over the last 10 to 20 years, there's been a very strong movement towards agile teams, lean teams. But then there's a question of onshore versus offshore, nearshore development. How do you structure your company to better react to change? And ultimately, that's what agile is all about. And that's something I strongly believe in. And when it comes to pivoting, that is really what you're doing, right? You're looking at how can I react to change faster, right? What can I do to prove that the direction that we're going makes sense? How do I set up my organization, my teams, my technologies so that I can try and experiment, fail or not, and learn what the next step should be? So for me, it's all about having self-directed teams, small teams that can move quickly, can move with a mandate, and can take an idea from cradle to grave very, very quickly, right?
How easy is that to do though, when, you know, the conditions that we're going through now means many people are working remotely. Some teams may have been furloughed. So all those things, they then impact the structure. So how do you factor that into these decisions?
I'd say technology is fairly unique in most businesses, in the sense that most technologists are used to working in a geographically distributed manner. They're used to working virtually. Most of their code can be worked on collaboratively in some way, shape or form. So actually I found that most tech teams work better in a distributed way, or more effectively. So if you have that set up already, actually a situation like this isn't quite as devastating as it could be. For example, if you've got an underwriting team or a sales team who might be together or on the road, suddenly having to be working from home can be a problem. But for most technologists, this is less of an issue. The bigger problem is if you've had to furlough members of your team, for example, as you just mentioned. And this is where we start to look at the offshore, onshore type split between businesses. Now, what's interesting is when I was CTO at Neighbor, I had a split team. I had some offshore resources and some onshore resources. And there were times when we would need to downsize or upsize, and having that offshore elasticity was very helpful, because it meant we could scale up when we needed to, but we could downscale as we needed. So in an environment like today where we're having to furlough people, having people who are offshore that you can start to go, you know what, we need to trim.
So for people, so offshore, you mean what?
So offshore is in a remote development team.
Gotcha.
So either in, and when I say offshore, I also mean nearshore as well. And the difference between offshore and nearshore is ultimately an offshore team is the team maybe in India or the Ukraine. A nearshore team would be a team that's closer to home, as it were.
And we've had an interesting question come in relating to that. So this is from a non-technical founder using outsourced technologists at the moment. What would you advise them to do? Would an internal technology resource be helpful if they're currently using an outsourced team?
Yeah, so in relation to that, just having an offshore team is dangerous, right? Not having any internal resource puts you at risk. And this is a mistake that a lot of companies make. And it actually leads to a level of rigidity and inflexibility that actually can break your team. Because it's tempting to push everything offshore and say, right, by having everything offshore, I don't have to worry about the technology. I don't have the skills to hire a technologist. I can rely on them. They can hire quickly. They can fire quickly. I can control my costs easily. Now, in a situation like today where I'm saying, okay, well, we need to start shedding people, right? That's great. But who's going to do the work, right? Yeah. Who's going to actually be in the business, understanding your problems to be able to do the things I talked about in regards to pivoting, right? Who understands your product well enough, and who cares about your product well enough to be able to look for new opportunities within your user base, within your product. So losing that capability in-house can be very, very dangerous, right? And I'm not saying every business should have a CTO, should have a VP of engineering, should have a CIO, but you do need people within your organization who have a strong understanding of your product and have a strong understanding of the technology that you either built or own. If you have some technologists in your company though, what that gives you is that ability to be able to react to change much, much faster. What you really want are your offshore teams to be able to provide that flexibility to scale up, scale down. But internally, you want core knowledge around your company's technology. Otherwise, you're no longer able to almost flex that IP that you've now developed. Because often I hear companies say, you've got an offshore team, but we own all the IP. Great, do you know what to do with it? Right? Most don't. That's a problem. And so, you know, often people say to me, do I need a CTO? My answer is usually, well, it depends on the type of company that you are and the kind of product that you've built, right? Whether your company is driven by technology or whether it's enabled by technology. And I know Yvonne's got some great stats about our pipeline that she can touch on a little bit around what that kind of looks like for us.
Okay, yeah, that would be really good to hear. Yvonne, if you wanted to share some of that.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, last year we had over 500 companies apply for funding, and of that, 63% of those companies were in the digital and technology space. In terms of technical founders, I'll say that, you know, approximately 50% of the companies that we met with have had technical founders. And this is where Ezechi comes in and just drills into the importance of having a technical founder or someone with technical skills on the team in order to provide that core expertise around the technology.
Okay, brilliant. And in terms of people, there are lots of conversations, Ezechi, around data. So how can data be leveraged when it comes to making these key decisions around pivoting?
Well, so think about my points around test and learn, right? Fail fast, learn faster. How do you do that? When you're driving a test, the key thing, when we talk about tests, we talk about iterations, this is all key to pivoting your business and understanding what direction you should go in. And this is the same with product development. What it comes down to is, how do you define success? How do you define failure? So before you take any step, right, any experiment, you need to have a very clear goal in mind as to what is it I'm trying to achieve. And the only way you measure that is with quantitative outcomes. It might be, an example of success might be that this experiment enables us to increase our onboarding rate by 50%, for example. So what does that look like? Well, this is how fast this is how quickly we can get a customer from, I want to sign up, to actively using our product, right? And is that measured in days, hours, minutes? How do you measure that? Also, how do you measure the drop-off, the funnel? We talk about all of these things like conversion rates from calls to action to actually signing up to your product.
Okay.
This is how data can be used really effectively in that attempt to pivot. But there's also internal data as well to your company around how do you use your services? How long does it take a new feature to go from an idea of someone on your product team to actually being implemented by your business, right? Where are the bottlenecks in your company? Is the bottlenecks in actually rolling out new products? Is it in signing up new customers? Is it in processing payments? Okay. Is it in dealing with customer feedback? What are the core items that are actually causing a slowdown in your business? Is it that you have too many services in your company and people are having to spend a lot of time sharing data amongst themselves? How often did we see in the bad old days where a spreadsheet would be shared around between 5 or 6 different people, everyone makes a change, it then comes back to someone else who then has to consolidate all those changes. Whereas now you could just say, you know what, let's cut out days of waste and just do it all on a Google Sheet. Right? These are the kind of examples of how you can effectively use data, not just to pivot your business, but to improve it. So I see a lot of these things as almost an evolution of process, as well as pivoting at the same time.
Yeah. So how do you choose? That's quite those are tough questions. How do you choose?
I think you've got to look at where's your pain. As I've said, it comes back to me, the first point in any distressed environment, any distressed situation is cash flow, right? Identifying our cash flow and what can we do to extend it. That comes down purely to optimization and efficiency of your company. That is where your first point of call should be, looking at the operational data of your business. The second point is then, what can we do? And this comes back to what I said at the beginning. What can we do with our existing product and our existing customers? So the new set of data points you're now looking at is, how do we interact with our customers and how do they use our product? The final set of data points is new experiments and how do we expand our business and what are those key things that we're looking for? If we're looking for revenue, is it enough that what we're looking for is customer engagement? Probably not at this time. You don't have enough time. You're no longer in that, whilst you're in that startup mindset, you don't have a year or two of runway to go, we're just going to collect customers for the next 2 years and then monetize them. What you are now looking at is immediate revenue generation. So those are the data points you need to be focused on. So really, there's a phrase that our CEO Eric likes to talk about, is you need to refer to the fact pattern of the situation. And there's 3 distinct scenarios there, which all have different data points that you need to be focusing on.
And how do you, all of this has such huge impacts on teams. So how do you manage the impact of all of this on teams?
Yeah, the psychological aspect of this is something that can't be ignored. I know back in my days at Neighbour, when I pivoted internally from more of a technical perspective, we started off building our own technology. The entire platform was built in-house. We were using really innovative and interesting technologies and paradigms. So this was back in 2014. We were using skill sets like AngularJS, event sourcing, CQRS, so command query response separation. Really interesting cutting edge stuff. But actually, we then made a pivot, but this was whilst our business was very much a peer-to-peer type lender. And we switched our entire business model from being peer-to-peer lending to be more institutional-based lending. So we had a completely different funding structure within our business, which meant a lot of the core technology we were building was now commodity. So at this point, we then focus more on, okay, are there external services that we can use? And this comes down to that efficiency purpose, right? There's no need for us to be building interesting, cool, new technology if there are services out there that will do the job. So we went from being a company that was very much technology driven to being one that was technology enabled.
And what impact did that have? How was that process or that transition?
So it was painful. A number of my team members actually straight up said, I want to create technology, I don't want to integrate it.
Gotcha, okay.
And I had to manage that time and that conversation. And we were still a small business. And that's a time when losing people is difficult, right? And it is painful. The reality is I had to let go of a couple of guys from my team simply because psychologically that wasn't what they'd signed up for. And that's something you've got to be prepared for. There will be people who want to leave. Sorry.
We've had a really interesting question come in, and I guess it's more practically speaking, given the environment that we're in. If a company does need to furlough, where should they start? Should they start with the most expensive resource, or should they start with the inexpensive? So you're talking about product management, engineering, sales, and so on.
That is a very good question. I would start with the people who are least passionate about your product. Right? Because in a time like this, you need people who are willing to do what it takes to get this over the line. Yeah. At that example that I gave, actually, we were looking to roll out our product with the new setup with the service platform within 3 months. And that was over Christmas as well. And I had a number of people on the team who just weren't happy about A, working in the new direction, and B, I knew they weren't going to be able to deliver the kind of effort that I needed them to deliver over that time period. And actually, they were some of the most expensive resources on my team. So I had to let them go. We then spent the next 3 months from November to end of January, rebuilding the entire platform. And we delivered it. Right, we were ready to go. End of January, here's the new platform. That was over Christmas. That was over an incredibly tough time, even though I'd lost some of my more expensive resources. So I think it all depends on the situation, right? It depends on what do you need to do and why, and who in your team is genuinely passionate about the product, because then you're going to get so much more out of them, irrespective of whether they're expensive or not, right? Don't get me wrong, losing expensive people is hard because they tend to be the more experienced people in your business. But sometimes what you need is drive, right? What you need is passion and belief. Don't gut your entire team of experienced people though, because passion and drive is useless without direction. So you need to make...
Was this a transition that saved money in the end?
I would say it made us more efficient as a company. Okay. Yes, because it allowed us to focus on the areas that were important for the business. And again, this is where as a CTO, you have to remove your ego from the equation, right? Your job as a CTO is to deliver the most effective technical solution for your company based on your company's strategy. Not to build the most interesting technology that you personally find entertaining, educational, interesting. Same goes for your team, right?
So you have to be a bit more removed and a bit more pragmatic and maybe take some of the emotion out. Because I can imagine many people in your position and they're going through what exactly the scenario you're talking about. So it's really useful for them to hear some of those insights about how you you take the personal and the emotional out of the situation.
Absolutely, and that can be a very difficult thing to do. And you know, it's quite interesting. I often get asked about this very question around that personable piece, that emotion piece, that ownership piece. I was asked a question by the Warwick Business School MBA group just at the weekend around exiting a business and how do you do that after you spent so long building your company.
Yeah.
And I say the same thing to CIOs, CTOs, to developers. Don't fall in love with your code, right? It sounds funny, it sounds silly, but it's very true. We spend a lot of time.
Repeat that again.
Don't fall in love with your code. I should get a t-shirt that says this, right? We spend so much time, you know, thinking about really driving really interesting, innovative solutions to difficult problems. And this is what drives most developers, most technologists.
Mm-hmm.
That we can find ourselves almost so attached to the solution that we've built that we don't want to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
But technology and development is a process of creative destruction. We're constantly building things, tearing them down, figuring out what went wrong with them and starting again, and improving and iterating and evolving over time.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be that where you end up in 5 years is not where you started at the beginning.
And,
right?
and is this something that because you Impact X works with a lot of innovative businesses, you've got a pipeline, a very strong pipeline. Is this something that you like to drill into the companies from the beginning? Don't fall in love with the code.
I try to, and I think, you know, I think this is something that people have to be aware of, and really all founders should have this in their head at the very beginning. What my business is going to be in 5 years is highly unlikely to be what I think it is right now, right? Every business pivots or changes in some way, shape or form. When Amazon
irrespective of what's going on.
Exactly. When Amazon started, they were selling books online. Who would have thought they'd become the world's largest cloud services provider, right? Could anyone have predicted that? Right, that's just one simple example.
Yeah.
Right. Neighbor, as I said, when it started, it was a peer-to-peer lending platform. It became an institutionally backed lending platform that also provided savings. Code Untapped, in-person labs events that is now pivoting into a virtual lab session, as well as providing e-learning and an e-learning platform.
Mm-hmm.
All businesses move and change and pivot.
Okay.
Right, they do. It's just part of the natural growth cycle of companies. The difference is now there's a time pressure to it that probably wasn't there before.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And not only are you having to do it under time pressure, but you're having to do it under extremely restrictive financial position in a very fragmented and chaotic market.
Yeah.
But that's why founders and startup founders are uniquely positioned and uniquely skilled to cope with these problems. This is what we do, right? We find solutions to problems. We come up with innovative solutions. That's why we look for innovative and incredibly resilient founders, okay?
Absolutely.
That's one of the things I really believe in. Sorry, I'm interrupting you. But it's one of the things I genuinely believe in about our cohort of founders that we're looking for, is that the people we work with have overcome a lot of adversity in their life and their experiences. This is totally relevant to what we're seeing now. And that creates a certain mindset, a certain way of looking at the world, and a certain drive to succeed. That is critical to being a successful founder, irrespective of what's happening.
Okay, so we've got about 10 more minutes left. So I just want to ask one last question before we then move on to some of the questions that have been coming in. And thank you again for everyone who sent your questions in. Just what does the future look like to you?
So that's a really good question. When you say the future of what?
Of tech, of pivoting, of the industry.
I think the future is increasingly virtual, increasingly geographically distributed, and I think it's about time, personally. It is absolutely true that the most effective way for two people to communicate is to be stood next to each other in front of a whiteboard. But there's only moments when that needs to happen, right? For the most part, we have all the tools, all the capability, all the technology for people to work wherever they want to work, when they need to. As long as they can communicate effectively, as long as they can collaborate remotely, as long as they have access to a good internet connection, they can do this. And I think the most successful companies will be the ones who can exploit that particular paradigm the most effectively. Because what you're doing is you're empowering your teams, you're empowering your people, and it encourages them to come up with innovative, interesting, and relevant solutions to core problems. Because they've got the mindset, they've got the space, they're not having to travel 2 hours to get into work and back again every day. What you're actually getting is a more energized, refreshed team.
Brilliant.
So let's not forget the social aspect. People do still need to be able to come together. I do think there will be a time when there will be opportunities for people to do that. But ultimately, I think the future is increasingly virtual.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ezechi. Thank you so much for all of those fantastic answers. We've got loads of questions that have come in. So Yvonne, do you want to group some of the ones with a similar theme and ask Ezechi those questions?
Sure. So around strategic decision making, what role does the board of directors usually play in that when it comes to pivoting?
That's a good question. I'd say, so the job of the board of directors is to identify the core strategy and the risk appetite for the business, right? That's really what they're there for. Do they identify the pivots? Maybe, sometimes, yes. But really, they're the ones who will sign off on it, okay? I think usually what tends to happen in small startups, at least, is that the CEO will get a new idea and say, we need to chase this direction. What you should be doing is empowering your teams, your senior management, your middle management, your developers, everybody to be thinking around, what can we be doing here to solve this problem? But ultimately, it will be the directors who will decide, this is what we're going to do. Great,
thank you. And where can people find CTOs? I think one of the challenges is actually identifying the technical talent. So that's one of the questions we've had come through. Yeah, finding CTOs and finding technical co-founders is a really difficult thing to do. Most good technologists are already employed, right? That's a simple fact. If they are entrepreneurially minded, they probably have an idea and are probably working on something themselves. So it can be a challenge to find them if you don't already have one. My recommendation typically is actually to start with a technical advisor. It's a lot easier to find a technical advisor than it is to find a CTO. And a technical advisor will have a network of senior technologists that they know who may well be suitable for your business and they can partner you up with. So when you're looking for technical advisors, I would be reaching out to people on LinkedIn. That's actually how we found a number of our advisors at Neighbour. Reach out to people on LinkedIn, go to meetups, go to events where people are talking, and find people like myself and say, look, hi, really impressed, been following your work for some time. This is something that I'm doing. I'm looking for someone to, to have a chat with. Can I have a coffee with you? Right? Don't ask them to be your mentor. Don't ask them to be your advisor. Ask them for a coffee. Right? Start there. Get them interested in what you're doing. Then do that a few more times and they'll become an advisor.
What's wrong with asking for mentorship? That's really good inside knowledge. What's wrong with that?
So there's this belief that everyone wants to be a mentor. The reality is that being a mentor, being an official mentor comes with a set of responsibilities and time commitments. And there's a two-way relationship between the mentor and the mentee that not everyone really wants to commit to, right?
So it's more of a question of time, really, and using people's time wisely.
Exactly. I get it. I get people coming up to me saying, will you be my mentor? I'm like, I don't even know who you are, right? Why would I agree to this relationship without knowing you, right? Let's have a coffee. Let's have a conversation. I'll happily give you advice.
Yeah,
over a coffee,
absolutely.
Right. Now, if I like you and I like the idea and I find it interesting and it resonates with my personal mission, I might meet up with you for another coffee.
Okay.
In a few months' time. Let's have another chat. right? But
Brilliant.
this is how you build a relationship, but it's similar to selling as well. And this is how you build teams early on, right? And with that team of advisors around you, you will then be able to gain access to other senior people who are potentially ready to join your organization. Now, beyond that, there's meetups, there's groups, there's all sorts of events that you can participate in. But that would be my first starting point. When people ask about, should I hire a CTO? I say, sorry, one thing, get a product person, get a good technical advisor, right?
And what does a good CTO look like, Ezechi, versus a great CTO?
Oh, well, I like to look in the mirror and think I was a great CTO. But that's a bad answer. What does a good CTO versus a great CTO?
Particularly in a distressed situation.
Okay. I think, so again, it's very tempting to go down the rabbit hole of CTO versus CIO versus VP of engineering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm not going to do that right now. But a great senior technologist, right, should be someone who's passionate about technology, right, has a strong understanding of it, yeah, is able to communicate that well, but also has, if you're in an early stage startup, also needs a deep understanding of the technology required to build your business, because they're the person who's going to develop that team. In a larger organization, it's very different. You have CTOs, you have CIOs, you have VPs, you have all sorts. But an early stage startup, they really do need to have all of those things. And ultimately, they need to be a great people person, a great communicator. The reason being, most of your technologists will have a hard time communicating with the rest of your business. That person will become that key conduit to be able to take senior leadership, the rest of the company, and filter that down into the technologists working for them.
Great, thank you. And what would be your top advice for a first-time CTO? And are there free resources available from technology companies?
So my first piece of advice to a first-time CTO, my number one piece of advice, get yourself a good advisor. Someone who's done it before, who understands what the job of being a CTO is, right?
Should the CTO come from the industry that you're building? Should they?
Not necessarily, but I would say it brings a lot of advantage if they already understand the domain space.
And should they know? Should they know that the industry that you're building in as well?
Ideally, yes, because when you're trying to solve problems, you really need to understand the nature of the problem that you're trying to solve, right? It's brilliant if you've developed all sorts of cool, great, and exciting technology, but if you don't understand the problem, you're going to bring the wrong tool to the party, right? Okay. And that's an issue. But my second piece of advice is very much, again, around the advisor. Have your advisor sit down with you and your senior management team and explain to everybody what the role of the CTO is, right? What is your job? Because most of the problems for most CTOs come down to a poor relationship or poor communication with the senior management team and bad expectation management.
Mm.
Okay, I think we've got time for one last question, one last very quick question, 30 seconds.
And for a number of companies, this is a really challenging period. So one of the questions that we've had is, you know, if a founder has to close their business, how do they make sure that the technology assets bring maximum value in a distress sale?
In a sentence, please, Ezechi.
Make sure all your code is in a source code repository, is well labeled, well documented. And
Brilliant.
ideally have an escrow set up.
Thank you so much, guys. Once again, we've wrapped up our session. The time goes so quickly. So thank you so much for joining us. Before I end, I want to let you know that if you're not already aware that on Thursday, we have another Founders Webinar series. And this time I'm so thrilled to be able to tell you that our special guest will be Ursula Burns. Ursula, as many of you will know, is an incredible businesswoman, an industry veteran. She was the first Black woman to be the chief executive of a Fortune 500 company when she was the CEO of Xerox. She's on many, many boards now, including Uber. And we're really honored to be able to have Ursula join us on Thursday. So please do look out for the link for that session, because that promises to be a really dynamic And it's very rare that you have these opportunities to ask someone of Ursula's position and stature some questions. So please do join us for that session, which is happening on Thursday, and we'll be re-sharing that invitation. So once again, thank you to Yvonne and Ezechi for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.